Hey friends, how are you? Welcome to the fifth episode of Walking with the Himalayan Master. I am reading the first chapter, so let's start. I finally decided that I had enough of waiting around. It was time to find out about mysticism directly. I made appointments with the senior monks and proposed the same questions. When does the mysticism start? How do we train? How long does it take to become a mystic? The replies were consistent in a very paternalistic way. I was told to continue on, and one day I would probably teach at a college or be assigned to a parish. That was the answer. Hey, I had already figured on those career assignments, but where was mysticism? I felt cheated. Not only did they know nothing about my burning quest, no one seemed particularly interested. With that disappointment, I began to rethink my commitment to monasticism. Payback time began. I realized I had been boxed into an intellectual paradigm that had lost its vital juices along the way, congratulating itself on performing textbooks, autopsies on Aquinas, abstract theology on the greater side, and life itself on the lesser side. Rene Descartes couldn't have asked for a better dichotomy. At first, I had the grandiose idea of performing the spiritual life of the province. Sure, that fantasy was short lived since I had not the faintest idea about how to become a mystic. Instead, my mischievous side flourished. I flaunted the house rules at will and made myself a general nuisance. I snuck out to movies at night. I raided the monastery kitchens during the wee hours. I cut my prayer time short. It was time to leave. I could say I resigned again, but more to the point, I was booted out. At least I had 2 new degrees in philosophy to show for my 4 years of finding out what didn't work for me. I now knew that more study was necessary, but without any money and with no prospects, where was I to go with my restlessness? As I settled into seriously listening to the Swami, my turmoil disappeared. The petty, selfish anxieties about my career didn't seem important anymore. His words resonated within me with such illumination that I thought he was speaking only to me. He told of how he had read all the philosophies and could quote long Sanskrit phrases, but that by themselves these turned out to be dry, lifeless accomplishments compared to the realization of truth embodied in his teachers. May restless vacuum was filling up. Departing from the monastery, I had returned to Chicago and lived a while on the kindness of my uncle and his family. A friend heard of my plight of no job, no home, and no money, and surreptitiously wrote a letter on my behalf. Soon I received a scholarship to Marquette University Graduate School in Theology. That next year and a half of study became the highlight of my academic career, never to be topped. I found an extraordinary teacher in the person of Bernard Cook, S.J. He showed how different fields of knowledge could illustrate theological implications, and he also had the ability to ground theological themes in very practical ways. His class should have held a dozen students, but someone had stolen all the registration checks at the mail depot. Throwing away the applications near the end of the summer, the theology department found out that dozens of students had applied, and although their checks had been cashed, they had never received acknowledgement of their application. Neither the school nor the students knew who was accepted. I was the last person in a list of about 90. By the time the problem was discovered, Cook had decided to open the program to all those who had applied. He divided the curriculum into 2 concurrent tracks. There were so many nuns and ex-nuns, priests and ex-priests, seminarians and ex-seminarians in my class that we could have started a credit union. They had all left their orders in disappointment after the changes recommended by the Second Vatican Council for Religious Life failed to be implemented. As I listened to them tell me about their former vocations, it became quite evident that mysticism was not only a rare commodity but belonged to a past millennium. It was almost a historical anachronism There was no current takers because there were no skilled practitioners. The Swami spoke now of his burden, a burden of truth. He had so much to share from the sages who bequeathed it to him. He said that he sometimes wept at night. Where were those who would help him? Is this a player for help because he can't do it alone? I wondered. People are lost in their confusion, he went on, because they don't understand their nature. He explained that we fear the unknown dimensions of our minds, thinking that the material realm is all that is important. We place our security entirely in external, or we escape to the realm of the mind. Sooner or later, we become dissatisfied, disdain life, and find no place to turn. Disappointed with our choices, we undermine ourselves and others. We forget our living center of consciousness, which is immortal, which is there to guide us through the flux of life. Scriptures can give solace, Swamiji was assuring us, but they can't enlighten you. You must light your own lamp. At this point, for all I knew, there were only two people in the room. His words became mine. The vacuum had been filled to near the brim. Swami Rama spoke of living an integrated life of body, mind, and spirit, not as an intellectual abstraction, but in actuality, in daily living. Without this holistic approach, he said, there was no escape from the wounds of disappointment. I realized that he was speaking of the missing component in my higher education. I had gone to Holland to study for my doctorate with the finest minds in philosophical theology, mythology, and religion. Professors like Schneebecks, Dupre, and Schonberg were at the cutting edge, and I filled my days with their classes. With the entire university open to me, I had also sat in on lectures in psychology, anthropology, history, and scientific methodology. I had attended lectures on the same topic from different teachers to get varying perspectives. Among all these dedicated teachers, I had had the good fortune to study with. Both in America and overseas, I was unconsciously searching for someone to demonstrate a holistic grasp of life, someone who possessed a practical cognizance of the life forces that shaped their whole person. Perhaps I was expecting too much for brilliant, though their lifestyles were shaped by their intellectual vistas. Often my teachers, for all their kindness and acumen, reminded me of many business professionals who, while attaining success in their career, nevertheless are terribly confused about life as a whole and expect for their professional skills, are unaware of higher dimensions. An educational map for embodied wisdom was not to be found nor even hinted at in academia. University education, including theology, inherited the legacy of Galileo, Descartes, Hobbes, Bacon, Boyle, and Newton. Each a genius in their own way, but each tragically flawed in understanding human nature and its wondrous possibilities. What was it the Swami was saying now? Truth is hard to know, one must prepare for it. From within me, a surge of joy and confirmation arose. I was almost shaking with excitement. It was a long time since I had felt so much enthusiasm. I pictured myself standing by his side saying, "Yes, let's do it. Let's take that truth to the world." I wanted to hug him. The vacuum had been filled. When the lecture was over, the audience began to ask questions, but the Swami raised his hand for a pause. He turned left, walked directly to me, and held out his hand. We shook firmly, powerfully. I knew that from that moment on, my life would be inextricably involved with this man and his vision, my vision. His words made living real. All my crooked meandering over the years, the temporary jobs, the blunders, the desperate searchings seemed now to be a logical progression to the encounter. Apparently, they made sense because they had prepared me for now. And so began my association with Swami Rama of the Himalayas, Swamiji, as I began to call him affectionately. 2 years later, we had a good laugh together about this rather tumultuous encounter. "You didn't find me, I found you," he said. "I was waiting for you." But first he had to stir up the pot. I had come laden with academic arrogance, prejudice, and general stupidity. He had to get some of it out of the way so that I could appreciate the moment of meeting my teacher. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening to me. You can give me suggestions. And since Hindi is my native language, so sometimes my pronunciation won't be correct, that I know, but still I'm trying, and I'll try to make it more clearer for you to understand. And I'll also add my explanation in the later chapters. But let's hear what Justin O'Brien is telling us. I'll also be reading some more books on theology and spirituality, the mysticism, the Agora tradition of India. So you can also recommend me books. There are certain books which are written in Hindi, Sindhi, Urdu, and in English. So I'll try to read as many books as I can, and I'll also try to read Punjabi translated books by Guruji Guru Sahib. So thank you all for listening to me. Have a good day ahead. Bye.